In the silence that follows forever, love learns a new language. Today, we discover how hearts heal when half of them is gone. And the stats are staggering. In 2022, there were approximately 1.59 million widowed women and 465,000 widowed men living in Canada, with 4 widows for every widower. While 1 in 5 Canadians aged 65 and older are now widowed, the average age of widowhood in Canada is surprisingly young at just 56 years old, meaning countless Canadians face this devastating loss while still building their futures. Today, on Beyond the Surface, we enter the sacred space of spousal grief, where 50% of grieving Canadians don't feel supported, yet 83% desperately want someone to simply ask them about their loss. Welcome back to Beyond the Surface. And once again, I have the privilege of having with me Dr. Sherbino. Welcome back.
Thank you so much.
How have you been?
I've been doing very well. It's a beautiful day and you can't complain.
Yes, and I'm so delighted that we can discuss this topic together again on grief, but now we're going to be talking about when a spouse has died. And before we dive in the topic, we're going to watch a video of someone who has experienced that. So let's watch it together.
Evening is the worst. It's when I feel most alone. My family offered to come visit, but I told them not to. I told them I'm fine, I'm fighting a cold, I just need to rest, which is true. It seems like I'm constantly sick with something, but the whole truth is I don't want to burden anyone. I'm still not okay. After my husband died, I don't know how to be with others, even family, with this aching tightness in my chest. And so, the lonely evening stretches ahead of me. I'm so tired, bone tired. I could go to bed, but I know there's no point. I won't sleep. I haven't slept in ages. So instead, I recall all our good times together. We had a great life. Travels, grandchildren, holidays with our family. Why did God allow him to die? Sometimes I think I'll choke on my own anger. What good reason could there be for his death? How is it fair? Why did God think it would be all right? Why does he think I could handle it?
Welcome back. So let's talk about what we saw here. We saw someone who lost a spouse. What does that look like in terms of grief?
Well, losing a spouse is often a major milestone in a person's life. They have come from their own family of origin, they have connected with another person, and have said, we're going to establish a new unit, a family together. And maybe they have children, they share life's experiences, the ups, the downs, they get to know each other very well. And so, it's interesting, they almost become like one, because they can even almost perceive how the other person thinks, how they feel, how they're going to react to certain situations. So there is this dance in life that they have been engaged in. And for some, it's been a long period of time, and for others, it's been very short. And the longer you've been together, probably the more you know about each other and feel even more connected. And so when death happens, there is a fracturing of that relationship. And for many, that becomes so difficult because they have shared everything in life with this person. And now that person is no longer a part of their life. And if they have children in that relationship, and the children are younger or older, that brings another play into the relationship as well. And so I think one of the key factors is, first of all, for the spouse to understand the role that the deceased played in that family unit. And maybe they were the nurturer. Maybe they were the caregiver. Maybe they were the provider, the disciplinarian, or whatever. And so that role is now gone. And if there are children in that relationship, this parent now has to adapt and take on new roles and responsibilities, which previously they never had to do. So their workload is greatly increased in terms of just helping to manage in the family system. And so that's why for some people, this has become a very challenging place in life, and they're not sure what they're going to be able to do.
That sounds devastating.
Yes.
And depending on the age of the children, how it happens, how late or early it happens, it will have different repercussions for that family.
Well, that's key because, let's say it is the father who dies. And what happens in a family system is when everybody is there, everybody knows the role that they're going to play. And we call that a sense of equilibrium has come into the system. When that person is taken away from the family system through death, the system becomes unbalanced. And people are struggling to figure out, how do we bring this sense of balance back into our family so that we're not so upset and things are moving in different ways that we're not accustomed to. And so everybody's going to have to learn how to adjust. And so it seems to me that in the family system, there's going to need to be a lot of communication between different members of the family. So if dad was the provider, if dad was the disciplinarian, if he was the educator, or whatever it's going to be, whatever multiple roles he played, how do people begin to compensate for that lack of reality? And so at times it can be very exhausting for the other adult who is in the picture to figure out, how can I work this out with my children? And so that is a whole new challenge that is going to be there. In addition, the remaining spouse is dealing with his or her grief. The person they have loved, they're building a life with, they're no longer there. And they're probably in shock. They're struggling with the reality that's before them. And some will say, well, what's the point of even trying to continue? I don't know what to do. Now, if you have younger children in the household, well, there's a sense of obligation that many feel, I have to continue because the children need that kind of support that was once always there.
And there is this whole issue of what happens next, right? Because now you're dealing with the whole grief situation, but now you have a family, maybe you have younger kids. How is that for a parent who's mourning the loss of a spouse, now navigating those things?
Well, sometimes what you see is that for the children, one of the things we say is this: don't make any major changes in the immediate future. Like, don't sell the house, or we're going to move to a new neighborhood, or we're going to get you into a new school. The change becomes too radical, and that's another sense of loss. So grief, as we have talked about, is related to loss. So if you've lost your spouse, now you're going to lose your neighborhood because you're moving. You're going to go to a new house. You're going to a new environment, a new school. You're adding multiple losses onto the major loss, which has already taken place. So you're going to make it far more difficult for everybody. What the research tells us is this: you need to have a sense of stability. So the more you can keep your life stable, the better you're able to adjust to the losses that you've experienced. And so children need to do well. We need to have routines. We need to have them be able to socialize with their friends. They tell us when kids reach teenage years, the people they hang out mostly with are their peer group. And so it's important that they have a good peer group that they can relate to. And so we want to keep that together. And so having as little change as possible is really critical for these young people. And then as they get older, they're able to adapt a bit more. But in the initial stages, I would recommend no significant changes for these 2 to 3 years.
Yeah, and I think one of the changes that I would like us to talk about is like the spouse who was grieving and now it's a new relationship.
Oh boy.
What does that look like? Because would that be part of this no significant changes? How does that work?
So the question that we all face is, how do I deal with responsibilities, but also how do I deal with the loneliness that I feel? So a lot of spouses have indicated that they feel extremely lonely. What happens is, for some, they decide to try to find someone else very quickly, especially if there are younger children in the family, because they need someone to help them with the responsibility, but they're also dealing with their own loneliness. So I will tell you about a situation that I know. It was a person I became acquainted with a number of years ago, and his spouse had developed a sickness which was terminal. And one day, she called him in to talk about her dying. Now, they had 2 teenage children. And she said to him this, "When it comes for my dying, I don't think you're going to be able to do very well, because we have 2 kids and you will need help to raise the children. So I have picked out your next wife," which happened to be her best friend. And she said, "You are to marry her after my death."
Sorry about my shock, but that sounds like surprising, right? Like you're picking the spouse of your...
It gets even better. So 6 weeks after she died, he married her best friend.
The one she picked?
The one she picked. And they moved into the family system. Now here are 2 teenage kids. Their mom has just died. So here is dad, here is mom, here are the 2 kids. This position is vacant. This other person comes in and takes that position. The kids can't stand her because they have to learn what it means to be a family with only one parent before a new person can be brought into the family system.
That's so interesting.
So within 6 months, they were divorced. It just didn't work.
Mm-hmm.
The kids couldn't stand her. She didn't like the kids. It was causing all kinds of conflict, and they got divorced. So here is the principle. You need to learn, if your spouse dies, you need to learn what it means to be a single person again before you can bring a new person into your life. Otherwise, you're probably trying to have that person become a substitute for the person you lost. And they often will not have the same traits, mannerisms, interests, desires that your spouse had and shared with you. So you have to learn to be single before you can enter into a new relationship of marriage. And the kids need to learn what it means to have a single parent, to have grieved the death of that parent before the new parent comes into the scenario. Then you have all kinds of questions such as, you think you're going to be my boss? You're not my father, you're not my mother. You can't tell me what to do. And sometimes you have the dynamics of bringing 2 blended families together. And that can cause even more stress. Now here's the kicker. When you bring 2 blended families together, it takes 7 years to build trust. So you need to be aware that if you do it too quickly, you're going to have a lot of rocky roads to travel over. So buyer beware.
So timing is important here.
Timing is really important.
I would love to discuss further things that's coming up. So let's take a quick break and we'll be right back. And please don't go anywhere. We'll be right back after the break.
In a Canada facing uncertainty,
we believe there's more to life.
from mental health to faith journeys.
From finding purpose to discovering love's perspective.
Hope Channel Canada brings light to life's deepest questions.
Because there's more to your story.
Hope Channel Canada, there's more to life.
Visit hopetv.ca.
Welcome back to Beyond the Surface. We want to hear from you. Do you have any topic that you would like us to cover? Do you have any questions? Please write us at info@hopetv.ca. We will love to hear from you. And now back to Dr. Sherbino. We've been talking about this kind of grief that's when you lose a spouse. I'm wondering what sorts of feelings come up for those who have lost someone?
Well, sometimes there's a mixture of feelings as they deal with the loss of their spouse. Sometimes there is feelings of guilt, such as, did I do enough? Or did I do things that were harmful? Or did I ever tell you how much you meant to me? And so there can be feelings of guilt and even regret. And sometimes for some of the folks in this area, as they deal with the loss of their spouse, they often have feelings like, am I going to survive? Like, I depended upon you for so much. Like, I don't know how to balance our finances. Or it could be, I don't know how to get a car repaired or where to go, or where are all the documents? And another one might be such as, how am I going to cook? I don't even know how to boil water. And so the question would be, am I going to survive? And they realize, I often have to learn new skills. If they're younger, am I going to be able to parent our children well? And so all of these questions become intermingled with their feelings of guilt. And then sometimes there can be great feelings of relief. If their partner was dying and has struggled for a number of months or years, and maybe was in pain at the end, there can be a sense of relief at the end that they are no longer in pain. And I've heard this even at visitations. People are saying, well, you know, one good gift is they're no longer in pain. Now that goes over you like cold water, but there are many people who think that and believe that that's part of that reality.
It's unique and everybody will experience it differently, right? And it makes me wonder, like, about older adults when they lose a spouse, because then they have been together for however long. How does that look like for older adults?
One of the things I found interesting is that for some of the older adults who've been married maybe 50, 60 years, when their spouse dies, it's not uncommon that the remaining spouse dies within a shorter period of time. And I've often wondered, and some would even suggest in the literature, they die of a broken heart because they have shared so much of life together, and some of them don't think there's any purpose of living any longer. Their life was so wrapped up with that person. And for some, it takes them a while to even come to grips with the fact that their loved one has died. There's one lady, her husband had died 8 weeks before, and one night she was out in the garden working, and it was getting towards dusk, and she said, oh, I better go in and get supper. And she went in, and she sat down, and she set 2 place settings, one for her, one for her husband, cooked the meal, and then said, oh, I better go out and call John for supper. And it dawned on her in that moment, John wasn't there. So you lose sometimes track of time. You lose sometimes track of place where you are. And you've lost track of the fact that your spouse has died because you've shared so much with that person. And it's not uncommon, maybe you're walking in a mall and you see a figure and it reminds you of that person. You think, that's them. And you go up and you're about to touch their shoulder or speak to them and they turn and you suddenly realize it's not them. Another situation that some people have struggled with is with older adults is, should they remarry? And sometimes you see them in nursing homes and they decide to remarry, or some decide to live in a common law relationship because economically it's cheaper. Though I don't support common law relationships, I know that's a reality. But what I have seen with older adults getting married is it can bring a measure of conflict with their children if they're still alive, because they don't see this new person as their mother or stepmother. Many of them refer to them as, if it's the wife, this is my father's wife.
I've seen that.
And they make that clear delineation. One of the things that has been a struggle is that what happens when the time comes for that person to die? What about the estate? What about what gives left to the children? So there can be a lot of conflict and butting of heads if that is not done. That's why I think there are two things people need to clarify. One is, you might need to have a prenuptial agreement for both partners marrying late in life.
That makes sense.
So that there's clarity as to where the estate goes. And that will save a lot of stress for your children when the time of your death occurs. But the other one is this, having a living will, where you can very clearly specify the type of care you wish to have given to you while you are still alive. And it's not dependent upon this new spouse making decisions which might be in conflict with your children. But everybody sits down, has a clear conversation, even has it written out, and has it witnessed by independent witnesses. That will deal with so many issues that could arise if you don't do that.
And it's interesting because it's a topic we avoid so much. I've seen it being avoided, and it saves you so much trouble if you can face it, right?
Exactly.
And I have a philosophical question here for you, but maybe you want to answer it. Why do we have such a difficult, challenging facing death in different ways, but it's such a certain thing for us?
Yes. I think a lot of people don't want to talk about death. We know it at a cognitive level. We don't want to deal with it at an emotional level. And I think part of this will stem from your own spiritual belief. If you believe that all of life is here and now, and that's all there is, then you don't want it to end. Or you don't want to enter into that of a loved one dying because you're going to be left alone. If you believe that death isn't the end, but it's the doorway into the full presence of Almighty God, that becomes a totally different picture. So your spiritual life will often determine your ability in many ways to talk about life and death and what is really important. And I've looked at it this way. When people die, many of them will die, even though you have people around you, you're going to have to die alone because you're the one that's dying. But if you've been learning to practice the presence of Jesus in your life throughout all of your earthly life, you don't die alone because he is with you. He said, I will never leave you, I will never forsake you. And he said, I've prepared a place for you, that where I am, you will be also. And so as we know him in life, we can know his presence in our dying moments, and then for eternity, being in the presence of God.
And that probably will impact couples who face that, right? Because that would flavor their experience of mourning. Yes. We'll be right back, but I need to invite our friends, Pam and Mike, to join us in this conversation. So please join us as Pam and Mike Tucker share their point of view of what we've been talking about.
I'm one of those spouses who lost a spouse to death. And I had to walk through that grief program myself. I remember that I had taught these classes to other people who were losing spouses and children and friends, but this was the first time I had had a loss of that significance. So I had to lean into the material. What I discovered is that the literature is right, and it's got a lot of helpful information, but it's going to look different for each person. And so for me, I had to do those exercises, the think, talk, write, and cry. I had to do all of that in order to make it through. To me, I added walking. I was a grief walker. I'd walk up to 16 miles in a day when I was grieving through the loss of my wife, Gail. I also prayed. I did something else we call leaning into the pain. There's certain things you're going to experience after the loss of a loved one, and sometimes they will come unexpectedly. And so I wanted to experience those things on my timetable rather than being surprised by it and be shocked by it. So I planned to enter into painful situations ahead of schedule before I absolutely needed to. Some people think that's masochistic. They think it's crazy. But for me, it worked because I was prepared for it now. It didn't catch me by surprise. So I leaned into that painful experience. As an example, I took a vacation to New York City, where we used to vacation at times. And I did that I cried all through the whole thing, but in the process, I reclaimed New York City for myself. So thinking, talking, writing, crying, praying, walking, and actually leaning into the pain helped from me.
As a marrying into a family, a new relationship with someone who has lost someone from a significant amount of time through a 40-year marriage, There was an unusual, unique position that I had to go through. And some may think that it's a little bit weird, but I had to allow for space for the family to remember the one that your wife that had passed away. And it can be awkward at times. It is still, though, allowing them the opportunity to share those stories that are helping them heal and walk through their grief experience. Whether you're a child, whether you're an adult, the firsts that you experience when your loved one is gone is always going to be difficult. The first birthday, the first Christmas, the first Thanksgiving. But the bottom line is this, is that when we are gentle and kind, we are making space for each other, and we're there to support each other through this grief journey.
What we want you to remember is when you're going through this grief, think, talk, write, cry. Get support from others, and take your own time. Take your time as you walk through this journey. You're going to make it.
Thank you so much, Mike and Pam. Your perspective is invaluable. And now back to Dr. Sherbino. As we wrap up, we have only a few moments together. Please share your final thoughts, but before, share your book, because you wrote a book about that.
Well, if people are interested, it's a book to prepare you. It's called Living, Dying, Living Forever, and it's available on Amazon. My final thought would be this: as we think about why people are afraid to die, I'm reminded of what happened to my mother as she was dying. One night she phoned me and said, "I think I have a death pain." And I said, "I've never heard of a death pain. What is it?" And she said, she got talking about it. So I phoned my sister who lived nearby and I said, "Can you check on Mom? I think she's anxious." So she went over and she said, "She doesn't have a death pain, she has indigestion." But she had this pain. So I flew to where she was living in Ottawa and I said, "I know you were feeling anxious the other night because you talked about a death pain." And I said, "Are you afraid of dying?" And she said, "Well, I know I will be with God." But she said something else that I thought about forever. But she said, "The worst part of dying is this: I have to leave all of you." So there's that attachment. And she said, "I believe we will see each other one day again, but that's the hardest part, is letting go." And that's why I think a lot of people don't want to talk about it, because they have to come to grips with that reality. At some place, we have to let go. But here's the best part: we let go into the embrace of God.
That's beautiful. Thank you so much, Dr. Sherbino. Thank you so much for being with us today. This inspiring episode, I hope it helped you. Thank you for joining us. We have future episodes coming up, and I hope to see you next time on Beyond the Surface.